Hey guys, it's Kevin with my review for The Afterparty. And this show, we focus on a bunch of friends, and they've used to go to high school together. They've all kind of gone their separate ways since then, but they are reuniting for their former classmates' party. He has become this international celebrity known as Xavier, and, the party is going on, but in the midst of all the party, eventually an after party ends up happening. And when this all goes down, there is a murder that suddenly does break out. Xavier ends up being murdered. And so now the question is who ended up potentially doing it. So the rest of the show is pretty much, going through the night one by one, getting everyone's testimonies and hopefully come to the conclusion of who really killed Xavier and what motive they really did have behind it. And this show, I was very excited for. I mean, I feel like, especially coming off of shows like Only Murders in the Building and things like that, I feel like when it comes to, sort of like detective mystery comedy shows like this, really are coming off of a high, really are starting to become something a lot more, welcoming and things like that. And this seemed like a show that was really going to do something kind of different with it. The fact that Phil Lord and Chris Miller were also behind this show, you guys know how much I love them and really just appreciate the way that they tell stories. I was very excited to see how that was going to translate to a show overall. It had a really game cast, and I thought the show had a lot of potential. And look, I will say this right now, the show is not quite as good as I expect it to be, but it still is a really fun ride. The Afterparty ends up being a show that really tries to do something very unique and different with its concept that I really did appreciate, and it doesn't hit every aspect that I really wanted it to, but we are going to get into it right now, starting off with the cast here. And look, that is one of the things that is one of my biggest positives within this entire show. I think truly every single member of this cast is on their absolute A game. I think everyone is so well cast here. Everyone just does such a incredible job, and I really just found myself really loving this entire ensemble. Sam Richardson is so good as essentially our main character in Unique. He is someone who you really gravitate towards immediately, but he also is someone that people are constantly sussing out as like he's the the person that is responsible for all of this, and the way that he is desperately trying to get himself out of these situations and prove himself to be the good guy. It's just someone that you really latch onto. I've said it before, he's very good when he's playing the straight man, and that's very much what he's doing in this movie, because the cast that he's surrounded by is a really wild bunch. I mean, you got Ben Schwartz, who plays his best friend Jasper, who also is who also used to be in this band, and he's trying to start this career in music, and he is such an entertaining character to watch. The way that he's constantly getting Unique into these crazy schemes, but also him trying to pursue his own sort of career, just a really fun character to watch overall. I also think he by far gives the best performance on the show, Ben Schwartz. He is so dynamic as this character. He's someone that you really find yourself attaching to, and there's a lot that he really is given to do as an actor that's very difficult, and I think he really does kill it in this show. Ike Barinholtz is a really big standout here too as Brett, who's this very douchey guy that is with Zoe Chao's character, who you also really do end up loving in the show. Zoe, Unique's high school crush, who he may still have a bit of a thing for. I think she was really fun to watch here. Ilana Glazer is really good as Chelsea, someone that really everyone is kind of suspicious of throughout the show. But I gotta say, the two biggest standouts of the show for me, one is Dave Franco, who this might be the best performance I've really ever seen him give. I mean, he is just so game to play such a unlikable character, and I mean that in the best ways. Xavier is every bit as spoiled and terrible as you really do expect him to be. He is this mega pop star. Everyone really loves him, but he's such a trashy guy in that way, and I just really loved the way he played this character. Like I said, he's such a dick, but he's such a fun sort of asshole to watch, and I think he just nailed all of that perfectly. I think he was so well cast here. But Tiffany Haddish is definitely the other really big standout in this show. I loved what she ended up doing here. This is the kind of role that I think Tiffany Haddish needs to do more of. I've said it before, I think when she's playing a role like this, kind of dials back some of the comedy, I think that she does a really good job. She is reacting to a lot of what's going on. She very much is the audience in that way, but the way that she gets so invested in this case is just really endearing to watch, and she's someone that I think people are really going to find themselves gravitating towards, and found a way to take what could have been a very generic cop character and really kind of made her own, and I really love what she ended up doing in this show. Like I said, the entire cast here, everyone really does kill it. I don't think there's a single weak standout in the bunch, and I just really found myself just really kind of loving the entire ensemble here. Okay, now let's get to the directing and the writing, because the directing is another one of the things that I have to praise the show with, because what I really love about this show is the way that it is structured. I think the style of this show is really well done, because what I haven't told you yet is that while this is a whodunit, it's not your traditional whodunit. The way the show is structured, essentially every episode is a different character kind of giving their perspective on the night, but they're doing it in a way to where, Tiffany Haddish's character sees everything as their mind movie. She wants them to she wants them to recount the events in a way that is entertaining, and so every single character has their own sort of genre. So one episode, it will be, the first episode, it's a full-on romantic comedy. It's really, sappy. It's very, like, sort of, cheesy at points, but it really does work. And then the next episode with, Brett is like this Fast and Furious type action movie, and it's completely ridiculous. But what I think works so, and then you'll have another episode, Chelsea's, which is like a horror movie. You got Jasper's, which is like a musical. So there's so many different genres that they're tackling here. And what really impressed me is that they really do commit to it. Every single genre I felt like worked here, and I really felt like we got something different out of every single episode. I think the idea to tell this sort of story, it's such an ambitious choice, and it really does come through. And I think Christopher Miller's vision, nobody could really do something like this but him, and it really does work. I think every single, every single episode has something different to bring to the table, and that's something I just really appreciate about this show. And this is not a show that's like directed by different directors. Like, Christopher Miller is behind all of this, and he just does such an incredible job of committing to these genres, but also still finding ways to keep the comedy in there. The comedy is still so consistent in the show. I found myself laughing hysterically at points with what was going on, and just the shenanigans these characters get into alone are just so funny to watch. They all have different sort of quirks to them, which you just really find yourself latching onto. I think just the directing from Christopher Miller is fantastic here. It continues to show why he really is like one of the best like sort of visionaries when it comes to this kind of storytelling. I just loved what he ended up doing in the show. And the writing, I think, is also really well done here. I think that all of the characters are, for the most part, very well written. Like I said, Anik is someone you find yourself latching onto immediately because he is being portrayed as the for sure murderer. Like, Detective Danner from the beginning is convinced, like, this is the guy that did it. His story doesn't make sense. He's motivated. Like, he's the guy who's done it. And the rest of the show is pretty much him trying to clear his name. He wants to do everything he can to show that he isn't the one involved in all this. And you yourself, are really rooting for him as a result, because again, this seems like a guy that has been accused with not as much evidence as expected. And I think that's something that they did a really good job with when it came to Anik as a character. He definitely was the right character, I think, to follow throughout all of this, and especially centering it around him and Zoe's sort of love story, again, is something that you do latch onto in the show. I think we've all kind of had that, like, high school crush, the one that got away of sorts, and the way that Anik is sort of, like, reunited with her, and they're both in different places in their lives, I found to be very interesting. I like seeing, where they ended up going with all of that, and I thought that was definitely something that I really enjoyed. I really found myself attached to, like I said, all of the characters here. Characters like Chelsea even, who, again, so overtly someone that you can immediately suspect because she has this very, like, creepy sort of, feel to her. Even that character, they give her a little bit more layers than you were expecting, and that's something that I really did appreciate when it came to Chelsea overall. There isn't a character here where I felt like they were just kind of throwaway. They didn't do a lot with them, but by far my favorite character of this entire show has to be the character of Jasper. I just really loved what they they end up doing with him overall. I think that, when it came to his whole storyline, and not just because he's involved with music and things like that, but he's the character that you are latching onto the most. He's the character that you're the most intrigued by, and I think he, by the end of the show, definitely has the most interesting story. So I really like what they end up doing with him. And then through all of it, you have Detective Danner, who actually has a bit more riding on this case than you would expect. There's some stuff that she's got involved with within her past, and she's done some things that her superiors are really just not a big fan of. And I think overall, they find ways to make this character exciting. She is not the generic sort of detective that is so stoic and is just trying to solve this murder. There's a bit more going on with her, and that's something I really did appreciate. She honestly ends up being just as goofy as the rest of the characters that we follow in this show, and so that's something that I really did enjoy overall. There's a really great recurring gag when it comes to this character, Walt, who is this random party goer that everyone went to high school with, but nobody really seems to remember him, but he remembers everything. He's this observer of sorts, and I really like what they end up doing with his character. I thought he was just such a huge standout in terms of comedy for me. Like I said, in terms of the comedy, I think all of it is just really funny to watch. The way a lot of these stories just go so off track in terms of what Danner is looking for and her overall reactions to things. I just think the comedy is really good in this show. I found myself laughing a lot throughout this whole thing. So again, there's a lot that I really do enjoy about this show. I think a lot of the sort of individual stories that we get are super interesting. Unfortunately, there is one flaw that I haven't mentioned yet, and it is a pretty major one that does bring down the show for me, and that is the mystery itself. Now, when it starts off, it is sort of interesting with what's going on. The idea that Xavier, is murdered and someone is trying to get revenge from like high school. There's a lot that you can do with that. My problem is the mystery itself, I just didn't really find all that compelling within the show, and it's mainly because, though I enjoyed all these individual stories, very few of them give us any sort of new evidence. They don't really find a way to maintain the mystery and build intrigue throughout this show. I mainly liked watching these episodes, not because of the way it solved a piece of the puzzle, but because of the fact that I liked these characters. I liked following these characters. I liked seeing, all of the crazy sort of, all of the paths that they ended up going on, all of the details that end up going on throughout the night. The mystery itself just lacked a lot of attention for me. It lacked a lot of suspense, and I feel like it does wear out its welcome pretty quickly, to the point where I did feel like at a certain point it was pretty clear who ended up doing it. And I said to myself, as long as this show ends in a satisfying manner when it comes to the mystery, I still can give it a fresh review, because that's not going to be a huge problem as long as, the mystery itself ends up being solved in a satisfying manner. And I'm happy to say that does happen, but the way it happened was almost too predictable, because by the end I had a pretty firm grasp on who I felt like ended up doing it, and it kind of played out the way that I sort of expected it to when it came down to it, and I just felt like overall they could have done a better job of either misdirecting us or providing more details, because the mystery itself just wasn't really doing it for me, and that was something that was overall holding back this show. And it's unfortunate to say that, because again, I think virtually every other aspect of the show works out pretty well, but it really is just that one flaw that does hold things back for me. The only other issue I do have with the show is that while I think the majority of the episodes here really do a good job at giving us a look at these characters and who they are, there's one episode that I felt like was almost completely unnecessary. It centers entirely around Tiffany Haddish's character, and I felt like it could have been cut out completely. Like, I get it, it's supposed to be like a parody of like cop procedurals and things like that, but it just felt like this extra thing that they wanted to do that only really gave us a detail centering around like a certain thing that was already pretty obvious. Like, we really didn't need to see it play out that much, and really just didn't focus much on anything. It doesn't connect to the mystery that's going on. It doesn't really it doesn't really tell us anything new about Detective Danner's character. It just felt very much like it was shoehorned in there and they just needed an extra episode, and it just didn't really do much for me at all. But aside from that, I really did enjoy the majority of what we did get with this show. Daniel Pemberton's score is also really well done here. I really enjoyed the music throughout the show. It's a very fun it's a very fun and memorable score, and I liked what he ended up doing. The cinematography as well, again, the way that they construct every single episode and really committing to these genres, having different lenses. One of the episodes is like fully animated. I mean, there's just so many great ideas going on in terms of the cinematography, and I think visual wise, everything is really great to watch. And the editing, I think for the most part the show is pretty well paced. Some episodes do overstay their welcome, but I was for the most part really intrigued when it came to the show. And like I said, when it came down to the ending, I can say I was overall satisfied by what ended up going down in the show, what we ended up finding out here in terms of the murder, what the motive was. Like, all of that did make sense. I just wish the mystery had been a little bit more intriguing throughout, because it did kind of lose me, and I started to care less about who did it, and are these characters going to get out of this situation, and who, I wanted to see more of these characters' sort of individual storylines, and that really does speak to how great the show is when it comes to building character, when it comes to, delivering in terms of, such a talented cast and things like that. But it just kind of lacks in terms of mystery, in terms of building intrigue. That very much was a detriment of the show for me, and that is the one thing that does hold it back. The finale itself, though, is really well done. The way that they ended up, building up to everything, and when we eventually got the reveal, like, it's a very satisfying moment, and I think I can say by the end of it, I was very much satisfied with the way everything did wrap up. I think that it's a really strong conclusion, and I think that's definitely one of the strongest elements. It might just be the best episode of the show overall. But other than that, I think this is such a wildly inventive show. It finds a way to take, the murder mystery and kind of do its own thing with it. It's got such a game cast, so many funny moments. Overall, I think this is a very entertaining show, and by the end, I definitely was happy that I ended up watching it. I wish there was a little bit more intrigued in terms of the mystery, but overall, I definitely had a very good time with the show, and I am going to give it a B-. I've also heard that they're gonna do a season 2, and I don't really know what they'd end up doing for this, because yes, you can center on like a completely different cast and still have Tiffany Haddish in there, but I feel like this is a concept that after a while is going to wear out its welcome. Like, there's only so many genres you can tackle, and I just feel like they need to do something different in season 2. Maybe don't do every single genre, but if you're doing that, is it even gonna feel like the same show? I don't really know how to feel about this show getting a season 2, but either way, I generally just had a really good time with the show, and I definitely do recommend watching it for sure. But over, guys, in my review of the first season of The Afterparty. Let me know what you guys saw of the show overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.